My name is John Linton. I'm the director of the OVAE Office of Correctional Education, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to moderate today's event. So good afternoon and good morning to you on the West Coast. We think the next 90 minutes will be very engaging. We have several correctional and reentry education experts, and from community colleges, nonprofits, community-based organizations. So I think you'll find that we have a very interesting panel for you today discussing their work. Looks like we have a large group of interested people. I think we're up to, about 120 participants at this point, and I'm sure that some participants are in conference rooms where there'll be multiple individuals, so we do very much appreciate the interest, and thank you for joining us. Before we jump into our content, I want to go over just a very few technical details with you. You should be seeing an introductory slide on the left side of your screen with the Department of Education logo, at least a slice of our logo showing in a blue watermark. If you aren't seeing this slide, please make sure the correct display tab is open. It should be the one titled OVAE Webinar Presentation. If you're having any trouble with the display and you have another web browser on your system, we might suggest that you try the other web browser to see if it works better for you. This webinar is meant to be heard over your computer speakers or with headphones. Please check your audio volume if you're having any trouble with the audio. Make sure your speakers are not muted. If you're hearing me but you have colleagues who are not, you may suggest that they close the audio broadcast window and then rejoin the audio broadcast by clicking on the icon on the introductory slide. If they're still unable to hear, we will provide a phone call-in number upon request. So you may email questionsforovae@ed.gov. That's questions for OVAE with no spaces, and OVAE is OVAE. So it's questionsforovae@ed.gov, and we'll respond to your message with the call-in number and password so you could listen to the audio over the telephone rather than through the computer. If you're experiencing any other technical problems while participating in the webinar, please send a short message describing your challenge to our colleague David Preve here in OVAE. His email address is david.preve, that's Preve, @ed.gov, and David will attempt to assist you. So we welcome active participation in today's webinar, so please consider using the WebEx chat and question features. You may enter comments or questions as the webinar progresses. We've dedicated time during the last half hour to respond to questions and comments. To enter questions or comments for our presenters, please type in the bottom of the Q&A box and click Send to all attendees. You may also use the chat box for technical questions or to let us know if you have any technical problem, and we'll try to assist you as best that we can. So I think we're ready to begin our content. Thank you for taking time to be part of this event today, which will focus on the substantial contributions that community colleges can make to successful prisoner reentry. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brenda Dan Messier, the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Vocational Adult Education, who will kick off today's webinar.
Thank you very much, John, and welcome everybody. I really appreciate your moderating today's webinar, John, and more importantly, I want to thank you for your leadership of our Correctional Education Unit here in the Office of Vocational Adult Education. On behalf of Secretary Duncan, Undersecretary Martha Cantor, and the entire Department of Education, I want to welcome you and thank all of you for joining us today for the second webinar at OVAE's 2013 Community College Webinar Series. The Department is thrilled to have this ongoing opportunity to engage with community colleges across the country and to highlight the many important contributions they make to the communities they serve. I'm sure everyone gathered here today knows how valuable community colleges are and the many critical missions they fulfill. As John said, we'll focus on the role of community colleges today in providing high-quality correctional and reentry educational opportunities for incarcerated and recently released individuals. This is critical, yet too often overlooked function of many community colleges across the country. In an era of mass incarceration, many community colleges are partnering with the correctional system in their state or with community-based organizations that serve ex-offenders to help youth and adults who've been involved in the criminal justice system rebuild their lives, reclaim their sense of purpose and direction, rejoin society, and realize their full potential. By preparing these learners to achieve their academic and career goals, community colleges are also helping to strengthen the families and communities that depend on their success. However, we all know tremendous challenges remain in providing the educational opportunities and support these individuals need. Many learners, including those in our juvenile justice and prison systems, lack the basic literacy and numeracy skills to succeed in the knowledge economy. We need to help all of them acquire those skills and then connect with further education and training. We also know that formerly incarcerated individuals need a great deal of support in order to successfully reintegrate themselves into their communities. I'm pleased to announce that OVAE, in collaboration with our colleagues at the Department of Justice, recently awarded 3 grants totaling nearly $1 million to adult education providers in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Kansas to test innovative correctional education programs aimed at helping America's inmate population make a smooth reentry to society through education and workforce training. At the heart of the projects will be the new reentry education model, which OVAE released last year. John will describe this in a bit more detail later on. Grant recipients will build upon the model, which offers evidence-based approaches to support individuals leaving prison to successfully transition back into the community through schooling and career advancement. We had a really tough competition. More than 75 organizations and institutions were competing for an award, so it was a very, very difficult decision. I want to thank everyone who applied, and congratulations to the 3 programs that received funding. In keeping with the theme of today's event, I want to point out that 2 of the awarded institutions are community colleges: Barton County Community College in Kansas and Western Technical College in Wisconsin. The other funded program is Lancaster Lebanon Intermediate Unit 13, IU13, an education service agency that works with school districts and adult education programs in Pennsylvania. Research has shown that the incarcerated and recently released population has huge potential to engage in higher education and training and become lifelong learners. A full 95% of prisoners feel they need more education to ensure their reentry success, and community colleges are uniquely positioned to assist many ex-offenders to develop the skills and tools they need to obtain long-term living wage employment and avoid reoffending. That's why I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to highlight a number of different correctional and reentry partnerships involving community colleges that aim to expand access to higher education for incarcerated and recently released individuals. First, Fred Patrick from the Vera Institute of Justice will discuss the Vera-led Pathways from Prison to Post-Secondary Education project. Brian Walsh from Peninsula College, a rural community college in Port Angeles, Washington, will present on the efforts of his institution to provide technology-enabled integrated basic education and skills training to inmates at Callum Bay Correction Center. We also have Marta Nelson from the Center for Employment Opportunities and Joe Cunningham from Hostos Community College, who will discuss CEO Academy, the unique partnership between their organizations that provides accelerated basic education and occupational training opportunities to ex-offenders in New York City. I'm also pleased to announce that we have 2 current and former students of these programs with us today to share their first-hand experiences. I'm very excited to hear from all of our panelists on this webinar, and I want to thank them in advance for their impressive work and for their participation in today's event. I also want to thank our partners on this webinar series, the American Association of Community Colleges and the Associations of Community College Trustees, for their valuable input on the development of this event. Gail Swartz, the Senior Vice President for Academic Innovation and Student Success at AACC, and I might say a former member of our OVAE team, has joined us today to talk briefly about AACC's work and leadership in advancing the community college mission. Thank you, Gail, for all your hard work and leadership over the years. Gail?
Gail, I hope you're not muted.
Was I muted?
There you are.
Very good. Oh, dear. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Brenda, so much. It's an absolute joy to collaborate with OVAE, my office for many years, and that I congratulate on all the terrific work that's been happening there, particularly on this particular subject, and also to partner with the Association of Community College Trustees and our good friends there. This is an important topic, as Brenda said, one that does not always get as much attention as it deserves. So we are so pleased to be involved today. And we look forward to an informative, enlightening, and inspirational session. As you can see from our slide, AACC's vision is about providing open access to post-secondary education and training for all students, providing individuals, no matter what their backgrounds, with the knowledge and skills they need for employment, further education and training, and to participate productively in their communities. Almost 70% of all post-secondary correctional education is provided by community colleges. And community colleges have been working with corrections programs across the country for many years in what is a very fitting partnership. As the recent College Board report titled "The Other Pipeline from Prison to Diploma" stated, and I quote, "With their open-door mission and their geographical reach, community colleges are ideally suited to take on the challenge of providing education to incarcerated populations. We know that the majority of incarcerated individuals will return to the community, and they need to re-enter prepared with the knowledge and skills that they will need to be productive members of society, earn family-sustaining wages, and not return to the correction system. So it's critically important for us to continue to strengthen, support, and grow programs that will allow for seamless transitions upon reentry, and most importantly, for long-term success. The country's community colleges are committed to this work, and we're proud of the many stories of success and achievement, some of which you will hear about this afternoon, that are in large part due to community college and corrections partnerships. I look forward to learning along with all of you from today's presenters. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to a great session.
Thank you very much, Gail. I also want to introduce Ji Hang Lee, the Vice President for Public Policy and External Relations at the Association of Community College Trustees, who is with us as well to briefly discuss ACCT's important work with community colleges. Ji Hang, thank you as well for your partnership on this webinar series and for ACCT's leadership on these issues.
Hi, this is Ji Hang Lee. As you know, I'm the Vice President for the Association of Community College Trustees. On behalf of ACCT, I first want to thank the Department of Education and specifically Assistant Secretary Brenda Dan Messier for her leadership on these key issues and her leadership on community colleges, but also on these webinars that are focusing on many of the key issues that our community colleges are confronting. ACCT is happy to assist the Department and OVAE to spread these best practices to the widest audience on these subjects. We hope that the information that is provided today in this webinar, the first webinar that dealt with adult learners, and future webinars prove useful as community colleges work to address the needs of these communities and our nation. Thanks again to OVAE and for your participation today as we examine these important issues. I just want to do a little tagline for ACCT. We represent the governing boards of community colleges across this country. Our core mission is focused around advocacy and education, and those are the key issues that are confronting our institutions today, is the educational components, but also the advocacy component of making sure that our institutions are provided the necessary resources to deal with the myriad of things that our institutions are doing on a daily basis. I look forward to the conversation today, and I look forward to listening to about some of the programs that are dealing with the correctional issues, and also learning from the students that are involved in the program. Thanks again, Brenda.
Great. Thank you, Ji Hang. I'm also pleased to announce that Amy Solomon, the Senior Advisor to the Assistant Attorney General at the United States Department of Justice, is with us today to discuss the importance of this work and the federal interagency efforts underway to improve reentry outcomes. In early 2011, Attorney General Eric Holder convened the first meeting of the Federal Interagency Reentry Council, which brought together 20 federal agencies, including our department, to remove barriers and promote grassroots efforts to reduce recidivism, improve health, housing, child welfare, education, and employment outcomes for formerly incarcerated individuals. The Council has inspired considerable work within and across agencies, including correctional education and reentry strategy work here within the Department of Education. Secretary Duncan is scheduled to meet later this month with Attorney General Holder and several other members of the President's Cabinet for the 4th Reentry Council meeting, where Secretary Duncan will describe our department's work in this area. So thank you, Amy, for all of your work to promote successful reentry, and especially for your leadership with the Federal Interagency Reentry Council. The Department of Education and OVAE are committed to this critical work as well.
Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be a part of this conversation today and to be here with my close colleagues here at the Department of Education. I want to start with a very brief story. My first job coming out of college was as a VISTA volunteer with the Department of Corrections, and my task was to help the department think about transition or reentry programs for people coming out. And one of the first things I did was spend a day with the teachers in the school. And I was so impressed by their dedication, by their curriculums, by the engagement of the students. And at the end of the day, I asked what I thought was a really naive question. I said, so what happens when they get out? Where do you send their files? You know, where do they register? How does this work? And they looked at me just completely blankly because that was not part of the protocol. It ended. Their files stayed in the library when they got out. And the takeaway here is resonates not just in the education arena, but with substance abuse and all the other programs that we pay attention to in the correctional arena. Anything that starts in the institutions are going to be so much more powerful if they continue when they're in the community. And so I just think the topic we're talking about today could not be more important, and the role that community colleges could play in this work is just vital. So as the token justice person on this webinar, I just want to lay out this issue, the criminal justice issue, for just a moment. Why should we focus on reentry? On any given day, there are some 2.2 million people who are incarcerated. It's about 1 out of every 100 adults. And the iron law here is that almost everyone who goes to prison eventually comes home. This translates to about 700,000 people getting out of state and federal prisons each year, and 9 to 12 million coming out of local jails. When reentry fails, the costs are high. To look just at the dollars for a moment, the U.S. now spends more than $83 billion on federal, state, and local corrections. So reentry is a public safety issue, and it's a fiscal issue, but it's also a housing issue, an employment issue. It's a public health issue, a fatherhood issue, and of course, an education issue. And it's also a community issue. The bottom line here is that in many communities, incarceration is no longer an unusual occurrence, but a commonplace experience, especially for young men of color. So this is a large-scale issue, and the justice system cannot solve it alone. Reentry success is dependent on creative solutions that are interdisciplinary across agencies and systems, and solutions that start in prisons and jails, and importantly, continue into the communities when people return home. But at the federal level, this sets the context for creating the Reentry Council that Brenda spoke about just a moment ago. This is a picture that you can see from the first Reentry Council meeting. And for those of you who don't follow Washington as closely, in addition to the Attorney General at the table, we have the secretaries from Labor, from HUD, from Veterans Administration, of course from Education, from Health and Human Services, from the Drug Control Office. It was an incredible table of secretaries leaning in to talk about this issue. And everyone can see, or for those of you who don't know her, in the bottom right corner, we also have Assistant Secretary Dan Messier smiling in the corner. But it was just an incredible meeting, and it's been a sustained conversation about what each of the 20 agencies can do to work towards a mission that helps to make communities safer by reducing recidivism and victimization, assist people coming out of prisons and jails in becoming more productive citizens, and that can save taxpayer dollars. And as Brenda said earlier, we really do think that by working together, we can have an opportunity to not only reduce crime and corrections costs, but also to improve education and employment, child welfare, public health, and other key outcomes. So I've got about 2 minutes left, and I just want to point you to a couple key resources in this area. First, I want to bring your attention to the National Reentry Resource Center. This is a one-stop shop for all things reentry. It includes a web page for the Reentry Council and all of our products, and it also includes a What Works library for effective and promising programs. I also want to draw your attention to our Reentry Mislis. These are one-page fact sheets designed to clarify existing policies and point people to resources that can be helpful. We're trying to bring clarity and transparency to the vast web of federal policies. And you can see here, this one is on federal student financial aid. We've got other Mythbusters as well. We've got about 22 of them now. 5 focus on employment issues, 10 focus on federal benefits. We're also tackling juvenile reentry issues, voting rights, child support issues, and others. They're all available online. And these Mythbusters don't solve all of the problems, and they don't change federal policy, but they provide a helpful first step in many cases. The last resource I want to draw your attention to is this interactive map on the Resource Center website. It allows you to click on your state and look at the reentry grants coming from any of the federal agencies into your local jurisdictions. It gives you a chance to connect the dots locally, as we're trying to do at the national level. I'm going to stop there, but here is my contact information and the websites for the resources I just mentioned. I really look forward to the presentations and the partnerships to come. Thanks, John. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And as Brenda said, Amy's been a wonderful partner on our reentry work, and we really appreciate her taking time to be with us on the webinar today. So we've learned that reentry is an important topic, and as Brenda said, community colleges are really important. And we all at Department of Ed at our recent all-staff meeting heard Secretary Duncan discuss the second-term agenda and talked about the important role that community college plays in advancing our national interests. So this intersection of community colleges and reentry, we think, is really a promising arena, and it's the territory that we'll be exploring together today. Thank you for being with us. We're delighted with the lineup of guests that we have. They'll be sharing with us, and I wanted to say at the outset, I think it's important to say that we did not do a scientific review of all community college programs working with prison programs, and we know that there are some other exceptional programs out there today. So the ones that we're bringing to you, we think, are ones that will really be interesting and suggest some things, but we know there's a lot of unsung heroes out there. We certainly don't mean to neglect or slight anyone that's working in this space. So I'm going to share briefly information about several OVAE resources in this arena, and then we're going to move quickly to our guest speakers. I know you're eager to hear from them. So first I have one slide that, Matt, could you help me advance there? Or? Oh, here it is. Okay, that's the one slide I'm looking for. So I wanted to bring to your attention information shared with us from the Federal Bureau of Prisons about opportunities to collaborate between community colleges and federal prisons. The Bureau of Prisons contracts for career technology programs and particularly invites community colleges to respond to their contract solicitations. And you can note on this slide a website where you can view solicitations to contract with the Bureau of Prisons to provide programs. And also the Bureau has provided to us an additional site with information in terms of how to best do business with the Bureau and to find resources in terms of those contract opportunities. So now I want to share information about our OVAE resources. Several years ago, OVAE commissioned an exploratory paper on community colleges working with prisons. Our contractor did a very exceptional job with this, and she helped us identify many fine programs. We learned a lot about the different models of partnerships in place across the country where community colleges are working with prison programs, and we're eager to share with you this information. This publication is available on the ed.gov website. It's an electronic-only publication, but I would encourage you to visit ed.gov and enter this title, and you'd be able to view this publication as a PDF file. Brenda made reference to a more recent work that we've done in OVAE on the topic of reentry education and trying to develop a really workable model for reentry education. This is central to much of what we're doing with our current work in correctional education here at the Department of Education. We're proud of this document, believe that it is cutting edge and can advance work in reentry education. So I commend to your attention this publication, a reentry education model, that you'll also easily find on the ed.gov website. The model includes a close examination of the major components of a connected process for using education as an organizing piece in the reentry process. When you examine the publication, you'll see that what we believe are the critical components of a reentry education model and how we believe that these components should interconnect. The components are expanded and developed through the publication. Here you see an overview of the central circle in our model, which we call the education services component. We're about to hear some, I think, very interesting examples today of some of these components that are listed here within this organizing framework. And again, as Brenda mentioned, we're working with grantees to test and prove the model and to refine it as necessary. But we do have great confidence that it is a sound basis for this work, partially because of the outstanding input we received during the development process. And in this picture, you can see Brenda with Amy Solomon and with Doug Wood of the Ford Foundation at one of the working sessions held as we worked across disciplines, across agencies, and across sectors to develop and refine this model. Our contractor, staff, our partners, experts in various aspects of education and reentry work together to help us formulate and publish this model. So we hope that you'll take time to consider it, to use it if you can, and to give us feedback on how it works or how it needs to be improved. So thank you in advance for that. Finally, one last OVAE resource, a different type of publication, but one that we also are proud of and think is very important. The two publications I just mentioned are aimed at persons developing and implementing programs. This publication is intended for use by correctional students, both those incarcerated and those in community status. The topics are practical, and this document is written to help persons refine educational goals and set actionable, personable educational plans. Unlike the prior two publications, this is not just a web-only document. It's available in print, and it's available in print at no cost. It may be requested from the Department of Education's Materials Distribution Center, which is titled EdPubs. Please note on this slide information on how you can request copies, either by ordering online or by calling in your order. Once again, it's a free printed publication, and you can request it by title. Take charge of your future, get you education and training that you need. So enough about OVAE. Let's get on to the core of our webinar content today and hear from those with boots on the ground. I'm first delighted to introduce Fred Patrick of the Vera Institute of Justice. Fred is joining us from the Vera Institute offices in New York City, and he will share with us news of foundation-funded statewide projects to connect post-secondary education opportunities behind bars with those in the community. Fred?
Thank you, John. Good morning and good afternoon, all. Let me begin with a heartfelt thanks and gratitude to Assistant Secretary Brenda Dan Messier, to John Linton, the OVAE team, the other units within the U.S. Department of Ed, as well as the other federal partners, including Justice, Labor, HUD, and others. It's extremely important. We're at an extremely important time and place in which reentry has taken a center point in terms of people beginning to see its connection to family support, community development, workforce development, economic prosperity. And so, again, we are thankful for the federal leadership in this regard. And certainly we want to give thanks to all of you in the audience and participating who are on the ground doing this work day in and day out, both knowingly and unknowingly. So much thanks to you at the colleges and community organizations that do this work. I am pleased to present to you today the Pathways from Prison to Post-Secondary Education project. And the key to this project really is partnerships, starting with our funders, all the way through the inside-outside components that I'll talk about. But let me touch on the funders. Pathways was initially conceived by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as a part of its ongoing work in post-secondary access, completion, and success. They were then able to bring in others, the Sunshine Lady Foundation, with its focus on the transformative nature of correctional education, both in prison and post-release. Open Society Foundations joined through its interest in poverty alleviation. And lastly, but certainly not least, the Ford Foundation joined out of its strong interest in higher education as a tool for social justice. So these are the funding partners that are in place as of today, and we're hopeful that other national and local funders will join soon. The Pathways Project focuses on individuals who are 2 years within release and follows them through 2 years post-release, with a specific goal being a degree or credential attainment. We realize that lots of programs exist, lots of partnerships between colleges, universities, and prisons exist, but what we're doing in Pathways is sort of bringing all of those supports together, the in-prison piece as well as the community follow-up supports, and again, with that sustained focus on completion and credential attainment. And this graph is meant to show just that. The two stars indicate both the possibility of credential attainment within prison prior to release, as well as attainment in the community post-release. The project goals. Certainly we'd like to increase the post-secondary education attainment by participants. With that, we hope to see an increase in employability and earnings. We're hopeful that these efforts will also reduce recidivism and improve the quality of life in neighborhoods disproportionately impacted by crime and incarceration, as Amy Solomon talked about earlier. And importantly, what we really hope to do is build the evidence-based case that in-prison education and reentry education is a cost-effective way to reduce recidivism, to increase employability and earnings, and increase post-secondary education attainment. We think it important that the transitional linkages that start pre-release and continue with the wraparound supports in the community, that those will make the crucial difference. And we're hoping that through an independent evaluation, we'll be able to make that case and build momentum across the country. The project currently consists of 2 states. First, the state of New Jersey, which was pre-selected because Jersey and many of its colleges and universities and correctional officials had come together predating the start of the Pathways Project, and they put together a statewide vision and plan called NJ-STEP, the Scholarship in Transformative Education in Prisons Project. They're now in 5 prison facilities in partnership with 8 colleges and universities, at least 3 of those being community colleges. And then for purposes of the project, they've identified pilot communities where you'll have additional focus and support on marshaling those wraparound services by faith-based organizations and nonprofit community service providers. North Carolina was selected through a limited competitive RFP process in which 6 states were invited to apply, and we went through a selection and rating process, and North Carolina prevailed as the highest ranking. Their partnership involves 8 prison facilities, 6 community colleges, and 3 pilot communities in the state of North Carolina. It's important to add that that competitive RFP really asked a lot. We needed states to show evidence of real and sustained commitment. We required letters of commitment from the governors of the states, letters of commitment from the heads of parole, corrections, all of the participating colleges and universities. We asked for letters of support from the heads of parties of both houses and of both parties in both houses and those state legislatures. There had to be an express commitment to the use of technology, in-prison technology, not as a replacement, though, for in-person faculty, but as an instructional support strategy. So the core components that we expect and that you should be able to see and observe across all pathway sites. I should also add that we're hopeful that other states will join as additional funders allow. So in terms of what a pathway project looks like in the states, first and foremost, you'll have in-prison post-secondary education provided by local colleges. And that's not just developmental and literacy, but that's also very much credit-bearing college courses that, importantly, are then transferable to the colleges post-release. And that we require that the states interested in pathways have articulation agreements in place that would allow that transferability of those college credits. We also ask that there be case planning and other academic supports, including mentoring and tutoring and advisement within prison. As I stated earlier, we ask that they declare an openness to technology in prisons in terms of instructional support, not in place of faculty members directly teaching classes and advising and supporting. On the community-based side, we ask that there be mentoring and tutoring and other wraparound supports in terms of housing and family support services, job readiness training. There will be linkages to employers. We very much wanted employers involved, not just on the back end in terms of providing internships and jobs, but just as importantly, as a part of determining what's the best curricular offer, what are the labor market trends in those areas to ensure that the degree programs and the certificate programs are geared in a way that really lead to a viable credential in that local labor market. Supportive prison and parole policy and operations were also a requirement, and that is everything from not arbitrarily transferring individuals who are already enrolled in a prison program, an in-prison education program, transferring them when there's someone else who's not involved who could easily be transferred. Ensuring that you had supportive parole officers who would not, for instance, schedule parole appointments at times that conflict with a preset college schedule. We ask that the states really think through things about what are the barriers that get in the way in terms of access, ensuring that the college professors are able to not only arrive at the facility, but sort of have clear, unfettered access to the classrooms in order to teach and maintain the schedule of courses. Importantly, the Pathways Project will create a community of practice, a learning community across the site. So we'll bring together representatives from the states and the colleges and the correctional agencies 3 or 4 times a year and talk about challenges, successes, next steps, how things are going, what supports are needed. And lastly, and importantly, a major component of the project is that there will be this independent third-party evaluation. We've selected via an RFP process RAND in cooperation with MPR Associates. We'll do an evaluation that will look at impact, outcomes, and we'll also do an implementation analysis. And a major feature also is that of the cost-benefit analysis, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is build that evidence-based case that this is cost-effective, that it makes a difference, and that it increases public safety, increases employability and earnings, and more importantly, transforms the lives of individuals, families, and communities. Thank you for your time. Look forward to further engagement on this project and other issues. My contact information, as well as a link to the website that further describes the project, is on display at the moment.
Thank you so much, Fred. That was very helpful. And I wanted to remind all listening and viewing that we will be having a discussion period about on the half hour. So if you had questions for Fred, we won't take the questions now, but you'd be very welcome to enter them now, and then we'll be cycling back to questions for each of our presenters. So let's go on. Let's move on to the West Coast. We're going to hear from Brian Walsh, who's joining us from the Callum Bay Correctional Center. That's a branch location for the Peninsula College in Washington State. Community colleges serve as the education provider in Washington State's correctional institution. Brian is going to share some highly regarded instructional practices which Peninsula has brought to Callum Bay. And I believe also that Brian might have a VIP with him that he will want to introduce. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, John. I Peninsula College is very honored to have been selected to share some of the innovations that we've implemented at Clallam Bay Corrections Center and at Olympic Corrections Center. With me is one of our students, Mr. Edward Hills.
Hi, and thank you for this opportunity to talk with you today.
I'd like to start off by thanking Edward for taking time out of his class and speaking about his experience in our classes. The three things that we'd like to start with today is how does a community college incorporate the community college environment inside the prison? How do we go about replicating the same innovative programs that are available on the outside to students on the inside? And how do we integrate resources available to faculty outside of the prison within the prison environment? Our overall goal is really what it says, to bring the outside in and to make the community college experience for inmates within our prison as close to the experience that they would have on the outside. Just briefly, I'd like to just give you some context for our prison program. As you can see from the map, Peninsula College and Clallam Bay Corrections Center are in the most northwest corner of the lower 48 states. This gives us some special circumstances. It means that we are in a very rural area. The two-county area we serve has approximately 100,000 residents, but is almost twice the size of Delaware. Clallam Bay Corrections Center is in a very small town of less than 1,000 residents and is a maximum security prison with 900 inmates, most of whom come from Washington's urban area. We also work with a minimum work camp, another male facility. That's a 370-bed facility that is about an hour and a half from here in the National Forest. The first innovation that I'd like to talk about is iBest. iBest is a statewide initiative. It stands for Integrated Basic Education and Skills Training. It was started in 2004 on non-corrections campuses. It integrates basic skills and vocational instruction, and many of you are probably very familiar with it. It has a minimum of 50% overlap, at least in the model that we use in Washington State, between vocational and basic skills instructors. Instructors jointly plan, team teach, and assess courses. They work together with students, and it allows ABE students and ESL students to be in college-level vocational programs. We have students that are from ABE level 4 and down, ESL level 5 and down, anywhere between ESL level 2 and 5, and ABE level 4 down to ABE level 2 as well. And we'll take higher level ABE students if we need to. It's been very successful in Washington in moving ABE and ESL students further and faster. And because of that, and I had some experience with iBest on our main campus, we decided to start it here at Clallam Bay in our baking program. We started it 2 years ago, and it's allowed us to have GED students who normally would just be taking a 6-month or a year-long GED course to then enter, to go straight into our vocational baking course so that they can then dual enroll and learn both topics at the same time. It allows us to have those GED students who have much less time or shorter sentences earn a GED and complete a year of vocational training before their release. Throughout the state, we've now offered that program in other state prisons, in carpentry, HVAC, and horticulture programs. And it has already shown increased gains for offenders and GED production. It's what we would expect given that it's been successful on our main campuses. The second innovation is around technology, and Edward's going to talk about his experience in the classroom.
Hello. Hi. I've been a student at Peninsula Community College since 2009. I'm working hard on earning my GED. I'm 38 years old. This is my third return to prison, and I'm sure my last. I've had a very troubled childhood, and at the age of 10, I dropped out of the 5th grade. The only education that I've ever received was from community colleges in prison. The first time was when I was 24 years old. My math has been a very difficult subject for me. I was stuck on multiplications for a long time. However, since Peninsula Community College since Peninsula College has implemented computers in the classrooms, I've started gradually progressing in math using what's called Khan Academy. I went from multiplications to fractions, and next week I'll be starting decimals. With Khan Academy, I have my own computer account on the network, and my instructor and I can keep track of my progress. I like the fact that it keeps my scores and challenges me to do better. Khan Academy also provides a map that allows me to jump between math sections and concepts, watch video tutorials on specific math problems, and I can work at my own pace. We also have a program called eGrainery, which we just got last month. It looks just like the internet and has lots of different information. I can use Wikipedia, ebooks, education and science websites. In my free time, I also have access to TED Talks and other computer tutorials. Overall, having technology in the classroom gives me the freedom to choose how I pursue my education. And I must say, before going, I would be remiss if I didn't give acknowledgement to Peninsula College, Mr. Walsh, Brian Walsh, and my instructor, who have been behind me, supporting me, and others in our classroom 100% to make sure that we acquire the necessary education so that when we get out, we transition back into society, that we'll be productive members of society. Thank you. Have an outstanding day.
Thank you, Edward. Because we're so remote, we don't have the faculty to draw upon to teach individual courses. And so all of my faculty are full-time. All of our courses are open entry and multi-level. Like most other prisons, we do not have any internet access. So what we've done is we've compensated by creating an internal internet in a prison. And I think, as Fred said, we see all of these technology tools as instructional support strategies for our face-to-face instruction. I'd be happy to explain the technological side of this outside of this webinar. You'll see my contact information and how we've developed this. But besides Khan Academy and eGrainery, we use Canvas, which is an open-source learning and management system similar to Moodle, and take advantage of Creative Commons licenses that allow us to copy websites with their permission and host them on our own internal web servers. So one benefit of this is that it's opened up the possibility of offering hybrid online classes in the prison, and giving our instructors the opportunity to take courses that are normally offered on the outside and then adapt them for classes on the inside. So those are our two innovations, iBest and our internal web resources. And I'd be happy to answer questions, and so would Edward later on. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share these innovations, and I hope to hear from you in the future.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Edward. We really much appreciate that presentation. Now we're going to jump back to the East Coast. I'm pleased to introduce members of a partnership for our final presentation. This is a partnership between a community-based organization whose primary mission is supporting justice-involved individuals in their journey to legitimate civilian employment. That's the Center for Employment Opportunities, a very highly regarded organization in this area, which is in partnership with Hostos Community College. And I'm going to turn first over to Marta Nelson from CEO, and she'll introduce the representative of the Community College Partnership, and I believe we'll have another VIP speaker as well.
Great, thanks. Glad to be here today. So with me presenting about our program, which unlike what we've heard earlier is a outside program. It's in the community. It's for folks who are involved in a workforce development program, our program CEO, and it's to really move folks from basic entry into the workforce, which is terribly important, but to giving them the skills they need and, importantly, the industry credentials that are required by a lot of employers for a more high-wage work. And that's a very important part of what community colleges do, for the workforce system nationally. They're divisions of community, of education and higher ed and workforce divisions provide these industry credentials for students throughout the country, and in this case, their students are formerly incarcerated folks who are with CEO. So joining me is Mr. Joseph Cunningham, who's the coordinator of industry skills classes at Hostos Community College in the Bronx, and Mr. Dwayne Dykes, who's a graduate of our program, and he'll be speaking a little bit later. So our program we call the CEO Academy, and it's very much a partnership between CEO and Hostos. We both decided that there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and we each have our areas of expertise, and when you put them together, you get really the best package deal for our participants and students. So the program serves people with criminal convictions, and to enroll, people must first be interested in going into the sector that we've chosen, which in this case is the skilled trades. We chose it because the participants are interested in that for the most part, and it's a pretty friendly field for people with criminal convictions. Plus, it has been an area of intermittent growth. Right now it is an area of high growth in New York City. We're pleased to see again. And folks need to have at least a math level of 7th grade. They can have higher, and many folks do in fact have their GEDs, but it's not required. CEO begins the process by recruiting the students, and then we do a prep program, a 3-month prep program. It happens twice a week in the evenings, getting people's math skills up to where they need to be so that the folks and the students can really handle the work at the community college, which involves a lot of measuring and fractions and decimals and things like that. Then Hostos takes over the skilled trades training, and Joe will be talking about that in a moment as we go through our slides to show you what the training looks like. And then CEO then picks up the ball and does the job placement. So we have business account managers that work with employers, and many of whom are construction companies and contractors, to place our participants in that field. So CEO brings them in, provides the bridge training, the preparation training, support throughout, guidance, counseling, and then job placement afterwards. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe to talk about the training at Hostos.
Thank you, Martha. I'd just like to say that Hostos Community College is honored today to be a guest speaker for everyone. And our partnership with CEO has been a very, enlightening and a great success for the college and CEO. What I'd just like to talk about briefly is a little bit about our classrooms and our instructors. One of the things we find is that we like to make sure that our instructors are professionals and working in the trade. Okay, this way they could sort of keep the students, and we can keep our curriculum up to date with current codes and changes within the trade. This way, when we send the students out there into a real-life situation, they're prepared for it. Okay? Another important thing is that we like to keep our curriculum moving. We don't like to keep a set curriculum. We like to tailor it as we go along. And one of the things we do and we encourage is we like to have the employers, people who are going to hire them after we're done with them, and the contractors come into the classroom, observe what we're doing in the classroom, and sort of give advice. And they might say, well, the last group that you sent out was a little weak here, maybe in sheetrocking, and we'd like to have them a little stronger this time around, so let's focus more on that. Or it might be framing, or maybe if we're doing plumbing, it might be pipe sweating, which is actually what had happened last time around. So we sort of tailored our curriculum again, and we like to keep it moving that way. As you could see from some of our pictures here, these are our instructors with the students doing some sweating in the plumbing classroom here. They're actually sweating a lead bend. And this is stuff that they would do on the outside. This is not something that we would just have them do just to know it. It's something that is a real-life thing. They're going to go out there and they're going to do this type of work with the employer. Another thing that we've learned about adult learners is that they need a lot of different media. We just don't want somebody up there lecturing for 3 hours. We need a little bit of lecture. We need some theory. We also like to do a little bit of media with some PowerPoint presentation, and most of all, hands-on. We gear our shops towards hands-on type of environment. They like that. These guys are hands-on type of guys. They don't like the lecture. They'll fall asleep in the classroom. And just ending, I'd like to say that the classrooms are always kept nice and clean. We always have equipment and materials on hand. When the students get in there after a hard day's work, they don't want to know that you don't have materials there to do the job. So we like to have everything ready to keep them engaged. With that, I'd like to say thank you for having us here today, and I'll turn it back over to Martha.
Great, Joe. I'm glad to know that that's pipe sweating. I've always wondered what those guys were doing with that blowtorch. So I've learned something today. So our last slide here is our graduating class. We graduate 2 classes a year, and this is the class from last spring. It was an absolutely terrific class, and it features our next speaker, one of the graduates in the corner, Mr. Dwayne Dykes. So he's going to just say a few words.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here, to be a participant here, and also share with you my experience. CEO offered me an opportunity to get a skilled trade for free at Hostos Community College, where I was able to. It also helped me to become more employable in the workforce field. Actually, I had great experience with the workshops and the lectures. I mean, it prepared me with troubleshooting, and it helped me to solve problem solving, in the world and out there in the real world. Also, I believe that it also helped me build a camaraderie with my students. Together we help one another fight over difficulties, whatever challenges we might have faced in the classrooms. And it's like we shared a common goal, and the common goal was to succeed and push each one through, When we saw one falling short, we helped that person along. We took time to share what we know, and it spread. It was a good experience for me. And I'd like to thank the people at CEO for providing me the opportunity. And like I said, it was an opportunity to get education for free, and that's very hard to come by nowadays. You don't pay nothing nowadays is for free. So I'd like to thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you. So we'll turn it back over to you, and of course we're around to answer questions later.
Well, thank you so much, Marta and Joseph and Dwayne. And Dwayne, we really appreciate taking off work to be with us. We know that's a sacrifice for you. So we're finished with our formal presentations, and this is our opportunity to be a little bit more interactive. And again, we do invite your questions. And we also have a small studio audience here with some of our OVAE staffers. And we do have a few questions that we'd like to lead off with in terms of getting the discussion going. And I'm being reminded here that you can, with this screen, type your questions in on the right. I certainly invite you to do so. So maybe we could ask a couple of questions of our student and our graduate, if they would be willing to be prodded to even share more information with us. Perhaps we could go back to Edward at Callum Bay. And Edward, you were telling us a little bit about your educational advancement using technology and how that helped you. What's your anticipation in terms of whether you think that will be of any use to you when you're looking for employment and when you're on the job? And maybe any observation in terms of whether you feel that some of your fellow students have found the technology as easy to take to and as helpful as you have?
Thank you. Well, I'm a hands-on type of guy, and they have this building maintenance program, too, that I would also like to transition after acquiring my GED. I have a lot of things that I really like to do. Definitely take some computer classes as well. But the technology here has been really phenomenal for me. I mean, you got to remember I dropped out the 5th grade. So to come back and to be reintroduced to basic math and seeing myself gradually grow since I've been engaged with the Khan Academy has been a phenomenal thing with me. I've always had extreme doubt about myself because of my lack of academical skills. And so now this new program has helped me start to chisel away at the doubt that I've always had about my achievement. So I really know that I'll be able to find a good job once I acquire my GED. Once I take up some of the programs that they offer here at Column Bay, I think it's phenomenal. And some of my fellow students, I see the change in them as well. Before, a lot of them would just come up and, lollygag around. Now that they've implemented these new systems and programs, I see a lot of them, really tapping into the computers, navigating the system, getting understanding, asking questions, provoking conversation. And I think that this is a very nice thing that's taking place here. I think that I can see potential taxpayers, productive individuals releasing to the community, not wanting to come back, but taking what they've learned and move on with that. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Edward, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us, and we compliment you on how articulate you are and bringing those points forward. While we're at Callum Bay, I do see a question on the screen about, and perhaps Brian could address this, about how the web-based resources are made available. Could you explain that a little bit more, Brian, in terms of how you can get those web-based resources to your students without them having direct Internet access?
Sure. Khan Academy, the version that we use is called Khan Academy Lite, and it's an offline version. And Elizabeth Vu from that group that's put that together posted on the chat the contact information. It's klite.learningequality.org. If you look under the chat, you'll see her comment about that. It's an offline version of it. So what we have is a server. We have a network of 90 computers, a web server, and we post it on our internal web server. Our network is completely separate from the Internet. It's physically disconnected. We have no contact to the Internet, so we just run our own web server with Khan Academy on it. We also run all of the other software that we run. Canvas is one that's run as a web server. And then there's tools that you can use to copy websites. I think the main one is eGranary from WiderNet, which is an organization that's put together an offline Internet in a box of resources, and they're developing one. They started in Iowa. That's called COPE. It's the Corrections Offline Educational Platform, and it's specifically for prisons to use for students to be able to access Internet-like resources. And if you, again, you can email me. I'd be happy to talk a little bit more separately in the details of how we do it.
Thank you, Brian. We were really pleased to find a program that was using that emerging technology. It was developed actually for third world countries where there was limited Internet access, and they saw the applicability to corrections environments with restrictions on the Internet. So we think that's a very interesting project, and be interesting to see how it develops in other correctional institutions as it's used more broadly. Let's go back to New York, and hopefully Dwayne's still with us, hasn't gone back to work yet. Dwayne, we appreciate your reference to the economic value of your employment and your training that you received. And I wondered if you could comment a little bit more on kind of what was special about working not just with a community college, but also that partnership with the CEO organization. How have they assisted you, and what impact did that have? And again, commenting on some of your peers, do you feel that the services that were provided really did make a difference in terms of people being able to stay with the community college program, bring it to completion, and actually find employment?
Okay, sure. For one thing, it helped me with resources. You know, it gave me contact with resources out there in the workforce. It also gave me it helped me strengthen my resume building. As a fact, you know, I was pretty weak there, like in that department there, and it helped me to build up my resume, and actually helped with networking. You know, I was able to reach out to other companies and other companies that was able to come there and see us at work and talk directly with the hiring companies. It also gave me some structure in my life, you know, as far as getting up in the morning, attending something, being responsible, showing up, and I took it just as though I was going to a job. You know, I invested the time in myself.
Thank you. How about was there a caseworker or somebody worked with you on a more personal basis, or what was a little bit kind of how that connection happened with CEO?
Yeah, there was several caseworkers. Mr. Darrell Rogers, and not to mention any names. Excuse me for mentioning names, but yeah, there was several of them, and I stick and stayed with them and followed their lead, their suggestions, and did what they asked me to do, and it helped me. Basic thing was just to be patient, and then just endure, just be positive that something good was going to happen, and they took an interest in me, and at the same time I put my faith in them, and they helped me. They helped me out a lot.
Well, congratulations on your success. We really respect what you've accomplished. We wanted to, hopefully, Fred's still with us and hasn't dropped off. We've been ignoring you, Fred. I wonder if you would... Thank you. We're glad you're there. Would you be able to comment on some of the challenges of making that connection between the program in the institution and post-release, and particularly in terms of your grantees, how they propose to kind of make that, do the tracking and make the connection in the post-release environment?
Sure. Well, the key is the establishment of the relationships pre-release. So what we have in as a part of the project and the way it's being run in both states is that you will have college-based success coaches and other staff who will make an alliance and form a connection with the students prior to their release. And we found, I think nationally, that whenever successful reentry initiatives have taken place, the key to that, again, is that pre-release establishment of a connection so that there's a seamlessness with respect to an individual having a point of contact post-release. And that's important. It's also important that in our model that the colleges be very much involved pre-release, not only from the perspective of figuring out what the student supports that will be needed, but also academic advisement, ensuring that that individual has properly filled out all the correct applications pre-release in terms of financial aid applications, college admissions applications, because although a student may be enrolled pre-release, oftentimes there's additional paperwork or the entire admissions package that then has to be put forth. And in all of our states, that would be done prior to an individual's release so that there's a continuation and hopefully there's not a drop-off in terms of having to miss a semester or anything of that nature due to the lack of paperwork. Importantly, we're asking that the reentry service providers, so through the local reentry councils and the faith-based organizations, that many of them also provide both inside-outside connections through mentoring, through tutoring. So, again, there's very little in life that replaces the notion of a friendly and known face that an individual can report to for help. And we find that to be the key.
And, Fred, following up on that, I assume that these are not short-term projects, that really developing those connections are going to take some period of time, and you'll be working with these grantees over a period of years?
Sure. So it's actually the demonstration activities in terms of the in-prison piece and the reentry supports. That's a 4-year demonstration effort, and then an additional year and a half or so for the actual evaluation. And so we hope to sort of learn and grow as we proceed. I think even during the planning phase, there were lots of things that were unearthed in terms of what are the additional barriers that we need to address on the front end to ensure success. So it's definitely a work in progress. I think the local reentry councils will make a big difference in terms of the reentry supports. But importantly, I think the fact that we're requiring that each of the areas have local stakeholder teams that will be responsible for the ongoing implementation. So you'll have your college partners, your correctional and parole partners, your service providers will be at the table in an ongoing way to adapt, adjust as needed to ensure the success.
Thanks, Fred, and we're really impressed by that significant commitment from your organization and the foundations to support these programs over a significant period of time and for such comprehensive services. We did have a question that I was going to ask Brenda Dan-Messier to address. Brenda, would you like to share what the question was?
Sure. Megan asked the question, Do we foresee future collaborations between the Department of Education TRIO programs, especially Student Support Services and Reentry? And we certainly think that TRIO programs have a vital role to play in a number of areas. Fred mentioned and Edward mentioned, and a case manager support, and certainly the counselors in the TRIO programs are that friendly face that Fred mentioned and can help folks to understand where the resources are, how to go back to college, how to apply for how to go to college or go back to college, how to apply for federal financial aid, how to apply for admission. So I don't know where you live, Megan, but we could make sure that we hook you up to the reentry councils in your community and state, and you should make sure that you're a full partner with them in all of their efforts. I would say that you mentioned the student support services in your question. I also think educational opportunity centers can play an important role. I used to direct an educational opportunity center program, a TRIO program, and we would provide services to folks while they were incarcerated and while they were in minimum release, so that when they exited the system, they had access. They knew the counselor, they knew our program, and knew the services that were available. So I'm happy to talk to you further offline if you need some help in making the connections to folks who are doing the reentry work in your particular community. But we see and really think TRIO programs can play a vital role and are really essential partners in this work.
Thank you, Brenda. And that issue of continuity, we heard Fred address that, and also we saw that in the New York example, and it's something we really stress in our publication, the reentry education model that we mentioned earlier as well. We did have a question addressed to Peninsula again, and we were asked whether Peninsula was the education provider for all of the state prisons in Washington. And Brian, I wonder if you could address that and perhaps expand a little bit about the history of the relationship between the community colleges in Washington State and the prison system, if you're aware of it. I hope that's not an unfair question.
No problem, John. So in Washington State, the Department of Corrections contracts with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. We're one of the states that has a centralized board for community colleges. That started about 13 years ago, 2000. Prior to that, the Department of Corrections contracted individually with different colleges. So Peninsula College is not the only college for all of the prisons in Washington State. We have a number of other partners. On the east side, we have Spokane Community College and Walla Walla Community College. Walla Walla does some really interesting things in corrections education with the Sunshine Foundation. We have then 4 other community colleges on the west side of the state that serve the prisons. So we have a whole number of different providers, and then we work through the State Board and with our colleagues at Department of Corrections to provide education. We're funded through an FTE model of full-time enrollments and have specific targets for GED production, vocational certificates, and completions, and then level completions for ABE and ESL level gains. That's basically it.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. And we've been asked questions about employment placement rate and employment participation. And I bet that, Marty, you would have some comments on those subjects, wouldn't you?
Yes, definitely. And also probably anticipating the funding question, which is always the question I ask on these webinars. So we began the program at CEO through basically private sources because we were doing it as a pilot to see, we were really testing how a community-based organization like ours would work in partnership with a community college to essentially come out the other end with folks with industry-recognized certificates and to place them in jobs. So we did well in that pilot and then began getting state funding that supports people moving through career pathways, and that's a blend of Workforce Investment Act, WIA money, and some TANF money from the federal welfare system, because some of the folks in our program, fit the TANF criteria in terms of being non-custodial parents of children. So it's sort of a blend of that funding together with other education funding that we apply for through state means. and again, sort of in a blend of foundation money. So we're constantly sort of putting together money from both workforce and education and private sources to be able to put the program together. But since some of the funding we get is workforce, we're always being asked, how do we move people into jobs and what is the percentage? So when folks graduate from Hostos with their certificate, and it takes about 8 months to do that, remembering that people are going twice a week in the evening, so they're able to work either with us at CEO at our transitional work program, or after we move them into that first entry-level job, they're able to work in that job while working on their certification to get that higher paid job in the industry. So that takes about 8 months to move through that program, 2 nights a week. And then when folks graduate, we find that our placement rate of folks coming out is hovering between 50 to 75%. And for the people that we aren't able to place, a lot of that is because they get their certificate and then they move on to find a job on their own. It's almost as if they're done with us and they want to then go find a job on their own, and we can lose track of them. But our goal is to stay in touch with them and to really be the door opener between them and the industry. As Joe said, we have folks from contractors and other folks in plumbing and electrical and carpentry come into the program at Hostos to see the participants at work there, so that we can sort of show them what they're going to be getting in an employee when people graduate.
Thank you, Marta. I've heard a lot over the years about the really excellent reputation, excellent work that CEO does. It's really one of the top-notch programs that works with ex-offenders and employment, and we congratulate you for that, and thank you for responding to that question. We're kind of jumping from coast to coast on these questions. They're going to go back to Brian again. We were asked about whether the program that is offered in Washington State, actually 2 questions. One is whether there is a whether there are post-secondary course offerings provided by Peninsula at the institution, and if not, why not? And secondly, and also perhaps if you could tell us something about the prospect for that changing in the future. Not to ask a leading question, I guess. And then also whether there are resources that others might want to reference in terms of your policies and procedures that could perhaps be used as models in other states.
Okay, to answer the first question, we do offer a professional technical 1-year certificates. We have one in cloud and web game design and development. Another one is in building and maintenance, which will soon become a green building, sustainable building program. We have another program in sustainable horticulture, a program in small business entrepreneurship and accounting, and all of these are, and then also our baking program. So all of these are 1-year college-level programs, and our philosophy is that if we can steal it from our main campus, we do that, and if we can't find a program that's going to fit for us, then we create it. So for most of those, everything but the cloud and web game design program, there are already existing vocational programs at local community colleges that we, either at Peninsula or at other partners community colleges, that we were able to, for lack of a better term, steal and bring to prison. And then the cloud and web game development design, we really didn't have anything locally, and we were able to create that. So I guess there's 2 parts to that question. So yes, we do offer some post-secondary, but we do not offer AA degree programs. Walla Walla Community College, through grant funding, is allowed to. And if I take the leading question right, there's an effort in the state to change some of our legislation, which limits the ability of community colleges and Department of Corrections to fund higher education degrees. We can do short-term and 1-year certificates, but not degrees. Unfortunately, our legislature was not able to move it forward this year. We're hoping it still might happen, or next year, that will allow us to start to offer 2-year degrees. Second question, John, if you could just repeat it again. I didn't quite get it.
Brian, we were being asked whether there were model policies and procedures that others could adopt or consider adopting, and I wonder if within the network of community colleges that operate in the in the state prisons in Washington, if there is a public-facing, perhaps a website where some of the standard procedures might be available for people to reference. I don't know if there is or not.
We have information on our state board site that has some of our interagency agreements, and that would be at sbctc.edu. I can find a link and send it out in the next couple of minutes and post it. But there is not many. There are not. We don't have. Not that I know of, but I can look around right now and see what I can find.
So, Brian, would you say that your partnership with the institutional officials is really not so much driven by standard policies and procedure? It's a little more kind of a personal partnership, or how would you characterize that?
Yeah, no, I would say we have a whole series of policies. We have to follow all of Department of Corrections policies, and we have documents that lay out the expectations for our programs, and there's certainly procedures about what kind of programs are approved. And those policies are public, and they're on the Department of Corrections site or on the State Board site. If I may just interrupt, I'm just going to have Mr. Hills say goodbye right now. He has to...
okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And, Edward, if you wanted to add anything to what you said before, we're very welcome to hear additional comment.
Oh, no, thank you. This has been a phenomenal opportunity for me. I really appreciate it because, I feel like we're not being looked at as numbers, statistics, but you get to put a voice with this. Again, it's outstanding work going on around the states. Thank you so much, and everybody have an outstanding day. Thank you.
Edward, thank you. Dr. Dan Messier suggested that you may include on your resume that you were a speaker on a national webinar.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
I definitely think you should do that.
I sure will. Thank you so much.
Both of you gentlemen.
You did a great job. Thank you again.
All right.
I wonder... Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I wonder if Dwayne might want to add anything. We should give him one last opportunity before we get pretty close to the closing time here.
He actually had to go back to work. He is working now as a foreman on a construction site. He's done really, really well. A 30-story mixed residential and office building right here in Lower Manhattan, and he got called off to go back. He was doing this on his lunch hour. So, but I will certainly convey your thanks.
Thank you, Marta. We really did appreciate his comments, and thank you for helping to facilitate him coming in to talk with us. It really is very, very helpful. We're getting down to our last few minutes of questions. I did want to ask Fred, I know that people are a little jealous of the states that are receiving the foundation funding, and I wonder, Fred, if you would have any advice for folks in terms of opportunities to engage foundations, your observations on particular aspects of correctional education work that the foundations might be most interested in, and perhaps something about your organization and why they might have chosen you to work with this project.
Sure. So I'll take the second part first. So the Gates Foundation, when they initially conceptualized the project, actually spent considerable time and effort thinking through who would be the correct national intermediary, and they vetted about 6 organizations and decided that Vera, in part because of our sort of neutral position, we are in 42 states currently. We always partner with government partners. We don't have an advocacy agenda per se. We allow the research and the demonstration projects to kind of take us to where we need to be. So I think that widespread presence, clear understanding of the criminal justice and correctional systems, significant research and technical assistance capacity, plus a long history of running demonstration projects in which you sort of seek to walk away with a better understanding of the problem, the context, and potential solutions. In terms of engagement of funders, I think we're at a ripe opportunity now where many of the foundations are starting to see the correctional population, including those recently released, as fertile ground for interventions around education, employment, because increasingly reentry is being seen as very much connected to the economic prosperity, fulfilling the needs of the business community. So I think a part of it is the marketing and branding, if you will. I would encourage individuals to talk to their local community foundations about work in terms of reentry and reentry education, but again, engaging them around how it benefits the needs of employers who are constantly complaining about not having a trained and skilled workforce, how it benefits families and communities, because if you can have an individual become an able-bodied worker who's able to bring home a better paycheck, then theoretically you're taking better care of kids and families, and so from that you get all kinds of additional business benefits, individuals who can now afford groceries and not necessarily sign up for public assistance, et cetera. So I think seeing correctional education and reentry education in the context of how do we create economic prosperity, how do we create better communities, transform lives, and if we begin to talk about it in that way, in that broader sense, not what we're doing per se for or giving to inmates, but how we sort of want to transform our community post-release into vibrant places where able-bodied individuals have jobs and are able to contribute day in and day out to the betterment of the community, notwithstanding, of course, that we also there's clear understanding that post-secondary education leads to a clear reduction in recidivism and reoffending by those who've been exposed to it.
Thank you, Fred. I think you're going to have the last word among our speakers, and those were good summative comments to give us a lot to chew on and to think about and to inspire our work. So we are running out of time for additional discussion, and so we're going to go into our wrap-up phase at this point. We could extend this discussion, obviously. It's a lot to be said, and we have experts with an awful lot of information to share, but we hope that this has been a worthwhile beginning of this conversation, and it's been a good opportunity to talk about how community colleges can help our nation move forward in addressing this national challenge of prisoner reentry. And so we thank you for stimulating our thinking and for advancing our knowledge. There are important questions and comments still coming in. We appreciate them, and we'll see if we can continue to respond individually. And you do have the the email addresses of our speakers, and please feel free to use them. So I'd like to turn to our Assistant Secretary, Brenda Dan Messier, for her closing remarks.
Thank you very much, John. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say what a fantastic, fascinating, and informative webinar this was. All of our panelists highlighted the importance of educating individuals involved in the criminal justice system, both inside and outside of correctional facilities, so they can more successfully reintegrate themselves into our communities and avoid lapsing into cycles of reoffending. All of our presenters today were incredibly thorough and insightful. Your work is fantastic, and it was impressive to hear all the great efforts you're doing to innovate and partner to help your students succeed. It was also wonderful to hear the perspectives of a current and former student who participate in these model programs. It is vitally important to hear how our work impacts our most important constituents, the students themselves. I hope that folks who are listening were able to learn from today's discussion and will continue these important conversations in your organizations. So thank you very much to Fred, Brian, Marta, and Joe for taking the time to present on your important work. And thank you, Edward and Dwayne, for sharing your experiences with this national audience. And really thank you to our large and engaged audience for your thoughtful questions. Unfortunately, as John said, we ran out of time and couldn't get to all of them, but it shows the tremendous interest in this work out there in the field. I just want to note that you'll have an opportunity to continue engaging with the department's community college experts in our upcoming events. This webinar was the second of our 2013 Community College webinar series, and we'll continue it next month. We invite you to participate in that event as well and keep the momentum going. I want to thank our partners, AACC and ACCT, again for their involvement and input during the development of this event. And I want to thank one of our outstanding OVAE staff person, Matt Valerius, for all of his efforts organizing this webinar and the entire webinar series. So thanks to everyone, and I'll turn it back to John.
Thank you, Brenda. And if your question was not answered and you wanted to send a question or a comment to any of our presenters, they've all agreed to respond to the questions from you, and their email addresses were provided. You can find their contact information on today's presentation slides, and those will be archived on our OVAE website, along with a recorded webinar and the transcript from today's event. So please check our website, www.ed.gov/OVAE, OVAE, in the coming weeks to access those archive materials. And as Brenda mentioned, OVAE's 2013 Community College Webinar Series will continue next month. The May webinar will focus on the role of community colleges and career pathway systems, and those details will be forthcoming. Watch for the announcement for the registration link on the OVAE website. Thank you, and good afternoon.